90% of the fibers actually go up to the brain versus going 10% down. Messaging is actually coming more from the gut to the brain. And this is the best part. All roads lead to Rome. Do you know where all the messaging pathways go? All of them, they all go to the amygdala. So it is 100% safe to say for people who are a little bit newer on the journey and want to know if their children can have outcomes is that if you remove inflammation and you support the gut really well, and all of that messaging goes to the place in autism where memory is happening and emotional regulation, it's safe to say that it's going to have a positive impact on the amygdala.
Do you want to wake up feeling like you are stepping into who you are meant to be, into the best possible version of you? What if I told you that the key to your best life, health, and happiness are all around you? You just have to find what works for you. I'm Hope Pedraza, and I believe that there isn't just one way to live a healthy and meaningful life, and that all you need is a little inspiration to make changes that last from the inside out. Each week, I'll be sharing tangible tips and inspirational interviews to help you on your journey. These are the steps to take to improve your life and live with purpose. This is Hopeful and Wholesome. Hey y'all, welcome back to the show. Today I have on the show Natalie Pelto. Natalie is an expert in multiple nutrition, life coaching, and lifestyle pillars that specialize in treating children with severe autism and ADHD. She focuses on supporting the entire family in recovering lost milestones to bring children to complete independence. Her mission and her vision is to see our future generations change the world from a space of health and well-being. And that's exactly what we talk about today, because she has a firsthand experience, which we'll talk about in the show, of helping her son, who came from being nonverbal, diagnosed with autism nonverbal, to completely thriving and functioning and being a totally different kid at 13 years old. And she really knows what it takes to really come from that space, from that diagnosis, and completely change the projected outcome. And she is an expert on the gut-brain axis and how this affects our kids. We'll talk all about that and what role nutrition plays in our child's development and the role of toxins and toxicity. She has a toxicology and detox specialty certification. So she's an expert on all of these things and really helps families completely transform the trajectory of their life after this diagnosis. And there's so many good takeaways here. Even if you aren't dealing with autism or ADHD with your kids, there's so many good takeaways here on just the role nutrition and the gut-brain axis affecting our kids and their development. So many good things and such an inspiring story. Let's jump in. All right, y'all, let's jump in. I'm here with Natalie, and we are talking about all things gut-brain axis, and kids. And I love this conversation. What I was telling Natalie before we hopped on, because I love this conversation about, especially the gut-brain axis in kids. I feel like autism and ADHD is, I don't know, I feel like it's a pretty hot topic right now. I hear a lot about it in my world. And so I'm excited to get Natalie's take on this because she is an expert in this. So thank you so much for joining me today, Natalie.
Thank you. Yes. So both autism and ADHD are a super hot topic right now. The numbers that just came out of Ireland were actually 1 in 20 for autism affecting.
Wow, no way.
Huge jumps. Yeah. And I have worked with autistic individuals for quite some time. I focus mainly with kids and some adults are starting to hop on the bandwagon, but it's this really great thing to get to better outcomes, right? Yeah. I think the goal is to see a difference in our children. If we look at autism numbers, the numbers right now are saying 1 in 20, but what if half of those are, severe nonverbal? What does that mean for our future later? What does that look like, right? Because I remember someone telling me that we're kind of like this mushroom, and the stalk of the mushroom is our younger generations. And they were talking in the span of mental health, and they're what hold up like the large amount of population that no longer is able to work or that is getting into the older stages. And what happens if that stalk is no longer, foundationally really, really powerful? And when we think about our future and our generations, that could have such a huge implementation or impact, especially when we think about if one severe nonverbal child takes sometimes more than one caregiver. With it, my story is that this impacted my own son. My son actually was severe nonverbal at the age of 2, and he was going through a autism diagnosis of regressive autism, which means he did talk at first.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden he started to not talk. It's really worrisome. It's not what I was expecting. I was actually heartbroken when I went into the pediatrician's office, and she was like, I'm pretty sure that he's severe nonverbal. And I was like, I was coming here for a speech diagnosis.
Right.
And like a referral. And I left there. My world changed. My motherhood stripped away. and the thoughts that my child may never live a normal life. So it was really hard. And then, I started researching. I was in healthcare back then. Like I worked 21 years in frontline healthcare. I knew that there was nothing in that space that could support what I was going through.
Right.
So I got to skip a lot of the things that a lot of people get really caught up on, like the assessment process, going to psychologists, going to go through all these, and then the waiting.
Right.
The waiting for all of the therapies, the waiting. And I was like, no, I know that this is not working. So I fell into the world of nutrition by accident of all things. And then I became certified in multiple nutrition certifications. And we had such a different outcome. My child's nonverbal severe state went from that to no longer needing a diagnosis within about 4 years. Yeah.
No.
So my son today is 13. You would never know the history of what we went through.
That's
looking at him, hearing him speak. Yeah, we had a huge, huge impact. And, when we're done with that process, you kind of want to shelve it.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of want to put it away and not think about it. And then the numbers started to go up and up and up. And so here I realized that something had to change. And so I didn't fall into the world of leading from the front on this one, but I felt this responsibility for our future generations. So I became very, very interested in child brain development, and I took a child brain development certificate, and I continued with my studies and ended up in lifestyle medicine. And lifestyle medicine changed the game for me in breaking down everything we did for my son and then putting it all in this beautiful little package of how I could teach it.
Mm-hmm.
So now the focus, I have kind of this very smooth implementation of how to bring lifestyle to our kids. Because I don't know if you know, but autistic and ADHDers tend to be the pickiest eaters on the planet.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
So going through that portion, we start with that. And then we started really working towards gut-brain access support. Now we do know, and I always like to let people know who might be listening who are like, well, I thought it was genetic. And truly, it actually is. When we think about epigenetics, which are these switches on our genes, there are 500 of them that are impacted by autism, or that are impacting autism. But the thing is that they're led by our environment. They're not led by what we used to think was, if you that you just have it locked in.
Right.
And autism is impacted in the amygdala, which is this part of the brain that a lot of physicians thought was just an anomaly or a genetic predisposition to having issues with the amygdala. And this is where the gut-brain access is so powerful, is that we have 4 messaging pathways from the gut to the brain, right? And our vagus nerve being one of the major ones. And all the fibers, I shouldn't say all, 90% of the fibers actually go up to the brain versus going 10% down. Mm-hmm. Messaging is actually coming more from the gut to the brain.
The gut, right.
But then, and this is the best part, all roads lead to Rome. Do you know where all the messaging pathways go? All of them, they all go to the amygdala. So it is 100% safe to say for people who are a little bit newer on the journey and want to know if their children can have outcomes, is that if you remove inflammation and you support the gut really well, and all of that messaging goes to the place in autism where memory is happening and emotional regulation, it's safe to say that it's going to have a positive impact on the amygdala.
Yeah, for sure. So, and what does that look like? So what does these, I don't know what, I'm sure you could give a bazillion answers here, but just like a broad overview, what does it look like for these changes that really help support the gut-brain axis for kids with this diagnosis?
So what it really looks like depending on severity, but it looks like more regulated states of emotion. We know that 95% of serotonin is made in the gut. So we know that autistic individuals tend to have and lean towards aggression, deregulated states, frustration. If they can't speak, it's even heightened. The inability to memorize, like therapy in autism right now is the primary treatment. And unfortunately, therapy is based in habit building.
Right.
Habits are built in a different part of the brain. It doesn't lead our children to adaptability. So if a child like with autism and is in this state of always kind of going through the same motions and something happens, their caregiver is no longer there, or, they move, or parents get divorced, all kinds of things can happen, right? The outcome to that for that child is absolutely devastating. So when we focus on gut-brain healing, we actually see better eye contact, better self-regulation emotionally, but we also see the memory impacted, which means that sensory processing also is impacted. When you start to remove the junk that we actually have. So this looks like processed foods, or looking at the toxicity in the environment, or toxicity in medication that everybody talks about. We actually start to see such a big difference because all the messaging that we get in our brain is just basically like this little wiring system between two neurons. And it's like an electrical pulse. And think of it as, sensory processing means there's a blockage or there's overstimulation and they can't process it in a way that's really, really getting the message across clearly. Because we're getting billions of pieces of information every single minute or every second. And so when we start to focus on those aspects, those blockages get removed and the messaging becomes clearer. And so we see less stimming, a lot less agitation. Our kids have just these better outcomes in becoming clear. Like when I look at children in the world today that have severe nonverbal autism, I see my son. Breaks my heart because I also see my son now and I see the potential what those kids could do.
Right.
The gifts that they could bring to our world.
Right. Well, and I think when parents get that diagnosis and, without being as, I don't know if I'm sure there's a better word for driven. I can't think of the word I'm thinking of, but as determined as you, or just not having the wherewithal to be like, well, there has to be another way. Like they take the diagnosis and that's it. Like they're like, this is my life. This is my kid's life. That's it.
It's true. And the unfortunate thing is that they create, like in a lot of cases, there becomes a relationship with the diagnosis. And that's okay too. Like the thing, and we also have to touch on the fact that a child with high functioning autism that is able to self-regulate in many spaces is very different from someone who is low non-functioning. Now, the thing that's important to note too, though, that I always like to challenge that thought of high functioning autism, of being, and I totally accept individuals who are high functioning and putting their gifts out. But the idea is that with the rates of mental illness for high functioning autism being so high and lifestyle medicine having such an impact on that specific mental capacity, it's like, it doesn't hurt anyone to be healthy. If anything, it's just going to make your gifts as a high functioning autistic individual shine even brighter. So I think there's been this huge divide in the world of autism. And the goal, I think that together, though, the goal can be looked at the same way that we see our children as just living the life of their dreams. And if we can just pool these thoughts together instead of all of the other kind of like emotional parts of it in the air, we would have better outcomes.
Right. So when you're making changes, when parents of these kids are making changes, so along with the lifestyle, right, you're making dietary changes. What were the big changes that you made with your son that made the most difference?
So it was a long process of trial and error. Let's see now, because I've refined the system for other parents.
Right.
It first off is actually filling the nutrition gaps. That looks like eating the colors of the rainbow and focusing on plants. We focus very heavily on processed foods. And even when people learn about autism, they will learn about gluten-free and dairy-free. Most people will have this on their radar. And the truth is gluten and dairy have an impact in the brain. It's almost like a like impact. Okay, that's great. But the problem today that didn't happen when I was going through the journey was that I had to cook everything whole foods. You couldn't go to your store and get gluten-free bread. And this was in service to my journey. So I think one of the number one things was actually going back to whole foods and overcoming picky eating. I always tell parents who are on their journey and they're like, where do I start? I said, everything, every resource you have, if you have a picky eater, should be going to that first. And that's where you're going to see that. Like I've seen people go from nonverbal, not fully conversational, but verbal asking and able to do requests and communicate basic needs in less than 12 weeks.
That's crazy. I feel like, I don't know why more people aren't talking about this. Like that's mind blowing to me because I know, I have friends who have kids that are autistic and nobody's talking about this. And I feel like you said, like a lot of parents have the gluten-free, dairy-free thing like on the radar, but nobody's talking about this because like this can literally change everything. Like, again, I feel like people get the diagnosis and it's like, well, that's it. This is it. But this is huge. Like, I don't know why we're not talking about this more. And also like when my first year teaching, I used to teach high school. Well, not my first year. It was probably my third or fourth year. I taught it was a charter school for kids with learning differences. And I had a ton of autistic kids. And most of the kids in my class had multiple things going on, right? They were ADD. They had all kinds of acronyms after their name. And they were on so much medication. And it always broke my heart because I would always know if they weren't on medication. I mean, they were like a totally different kid when they weren't on their medication. And I get the reason for it. And I'm not like, this is not coming from a place of judgment, but it just broke my heart because like you're talking about, like, there are alternatives out there. Like there are other ways to manage all of that.
I'm watching right now, and I mean, I'm in the autism world and I'm not a one-off, right? There are hundreds to thousands of us that are having the same outcome.
Yeah.
And I see sometimes like families that are seeing this, their 11-year-olds have to go on, high blood pressure medication, thyroid medication. These are lifestyle illnesses.
Yep.
These are all based in lifestyle.
Yep.
And I will sometimes see a parent trying to struggle to find ways to give them their medication. It's the same effort to give them new foods. It's literally the same thing. It's just choosing a different hard for a shorter period of time.
Yep. Right.
So, and that's what I say. It's like autism can be really hard, especially severe non-functioning autism.
Right.
And, changing our habits can be hard. One of them just gets better. And the other one, if you don't do it, just gets worse. So you have to choose your hard for a bit.
Yeah. No, I love how you say that, to choose your hard, because it is. I mean, it's hard either way. Like there's no discounting the fact that it's going to be hard work and it's going to be a journey. But I mean, looking at it, I know you said it took your son about 4 years. And I'm sure in the moment you're like, oh my gosh, this is like taking forever. But looking back now, like 4 years is a blip. And now he's 13 and he's like, it's nothing.
It's literally like a blip.
Yeah. It's nothing.
And the truth is that I didn't even have a goal of this. For me, what I saw one person, like back then, like being an early adopter of trying this new way, like I had no support.
Yeah.
Everybody was like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Why don't you want to give him cheesies? You know what I mean? Family events were like, oh, you're restricting him. I was like, well, no, I'm just trying not to poison him.
Right.
It's really an interesting conversion of thought that we had to go through.
Yep. For sure.
And a lot of boundaries. But the truth is that it did feel like a blip. But my whole goal was not to like get to where we got to at all. At first, I just wanted like independence. I was like, I would just love for him to play with another child, connect. Because like he wouldn't even answer to his own name. He was not able to even like immerse like any part of, he was just completely closed off.
Yeah.
And that was the hard part. I just wanted to have a relationship with my child, for him to have a relationship with his sister. And then as we went through the process, it just got better and better. And when something's getting better, you just don't stop.
Right. Yeah, totally.
Going. And then next thing you knew, we were released from all care because he didn't qualify anymore.
That's crazy.
And I remember I was told I would have to wait 6 months for an AAC machine, which is like the iPad communication therapy machine. And that was the moment that really changed me, actually. That was the moment where I was told that he would likely have to speak to me through a machine for the rest of his life. That I was like, no, I don't. That's not my outcome. That's not, I'm going to do every single thing in my power to have a different outcome. And I remember getting that phone call 12 months later. It took much longer. Now it's 4 years in Canada to get that thing.
Gosh.
And I remember getting on the phone and just saying, yeah, actually, I can give up my spot. My son is fully conversational right now. And they were like, wow, that's not the normal response we get.
Yeah.
So
that's crazy. So I'd love to know your thoughts on toxicity, because you talked about toxins a second ago. You mentioned it a second ago. And I know you have some specialty certifications in toxicology and stuff. So, and I know this plays a huge piece in brain development and the gut-brain axis and all of that. So I guess, can you just kind of give us like an overview of maybe the biggest toxins that we're coming into contact with that are affecting the gut-brain axis and what is really affecting our kids?
Yeah, well, our day today, so we got to put it into perspective. Our children today, so the WHO says the average umbilical cord actually tests for about 200 toxins. Some of these are neurodevelopmental, and some of them are cancer causers, and some of them are causing deformities. So when we think that, that's like our children are literally being born toxic. This is a generational condition.
Yeah.
Yes. And so if I were to say a rounded view, chemical toxicity is huge. Think about when we wipe our children's butts now. They're constantly getting exposed to things like, maybe not talc so much because that one is on everybody's radar.
Right.
But even baby wipes, when we're using fragrances, those are hormone disruptors. We're like loading our children with them. And then what I'm noticing a lot is that because also adult populations, like pregnant moms and before, we've consumed a lot of heavy metals, and those can actually be passed down as well. So it's not just one thing, I like to say, it's a compilation of many exposures. But heavy metals, generally children will see a huge shift after incorporating certain foods that are supportive, like cilantro. They actually notice, even if it's just eating, juicing, smoothieing, whatever way you want to get it in, that binds to heavy metal toxicity. And so oftentimes we'll see some major changes just by doing these things. But at the end of the day, I'd say that looking at the chemicals that are in our surroundings, if you see hair, like I see a lot of tests because I work with a lot of families, and I'll get their hair mineral tests. And because there's only a few different ways to test for heavy metals.
Yeah, that's a big one. Yeah, that's the one I use. I use the HTMA. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're seeing things like aluminum, mercury. I mean, a 4-year-old should not be testing super high for those things.
Right.
And then we're seeing a lot of antimony, something that you don't realize is literally on our clothes. Like our parents and grandparents, when they got clothes, it was not like sprayed in this solution to make sure that it doesn't burn.
That's so
now,
true.
Yeah. And now I get it. Like they do it so that when they're on planes and they're transporting all this, but they haven't gotten in the habit of also washing the clothes. And we're just getting into that habit now.
Yep.
So most autistic kids will actually test really high for antimony. And so it's like a flame retardant.
Yeah.
So chemical toxicity is a big deal. Heavy metal toxicity is a huge deal. Liver toxicity, and then GI mycotoxins, which are live toxins. So when the body is depleted in its ability and its detox, and let's really be honest, like kids do not have a detox system. Like we used to think so. We used to think theirs was better than an adult's, but it's not. It's a system like every other system that has to develop over micro exposures over time.
Right.
Their reaction is very different. Now, in relation to the gut-brain axis, though, this is how it looks. When we ingest or breathe in or put on our skin toxins for a child, it's different than for an adult because the vagus nerve is much more open, right? The bowels aren't fully developed till they're 5. And so that opening just allows for way more chemicals and way more toxicity and way more inflammation to go up, 90% going up, right? So when we think of toxicity in our world and the massive exposures, they compare it to saying that our grandparents would get in 2 years what we're getting sometimes in a week to 2 weeks.
That's crazy town. Oh my gosh.
I think they say the average woman statistically will put roughly around 500 chemicals on her face before she leaves the house.
Holy moly.
Yeah.
Like if that doesn't tell y'all to go look in your cabinets, y'all, like go clean some stuff.
My favorite, I give this resource all the time. It's totally free. You can download the Think Dirty app on any Android, on any phone, iOS, doesn't matter. And it's a scanning system. And I mean, that thing's been around for so long that most products are in there. And it's like you scan away. I mean, don't be scared because like most of your products may come back not as clean as you thought.
Right.
But the truth is that it gives you power, right? And empowerment means that we talk with our dollars and we put them and invest in companies that are trying their best to change this.
Exactly. Well, and I think, I feel like especially the last, I don't know, 5 years, I feel like it's evolved so much because I feel like maybe 5 years ago or so, everything that was quote unquote like cleaner was so expensive. And then you're like, well, I don't want to spend. But now like there's so many brands that it's so affordable. Like, so you can't use price as a thing anymore because there's so many out there that are literally the same price as, the
or
brand
less,
name
like
or
vinegar,
less. Exactly.
Vinegar and water.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. So you can't even use the price thing anymore. Yeah. There's so many options out there. So you mentioned cilantro briefly of like ways. So do you have other things to like, for people to kind of start implementing that can help with kind of this removing toxicity from the body?
So the first step to being very safe with our kids, because that's the thing, right? People hear detox is like, oh my God.
Right.
No, that's so dangerous.
Yes.
Actually, the first thing, it's not chelation therapy. We're not clawing out toxins from our kids. The first thing to do is actually just environmentally remove the harm. That's like how we focus. Environmentally remove the harm at first. And then we replenish the body so that its detoxification system can work better. That looks like whole foods and eating the color of the rainbow. Like I said before, is like the quickest and like probably easiest way I can explain it for people. And it's a variety, diversifying, because each color supports different systems within the body. So I don't like to make it complicated, but when they go through the Blue Life Autism program, which is the program that I run, there is an entire detox there that goes through a 4-week detox that supports each of these in great, great detail. But at the beginning, just focusing on overcoming picky eating will start the detoxification process. People don't realize that it could be that simple.
Yeah. Yeah, that's perfect. So I have just a more of an opinion question. I just love to know your thoughts because you are like immersed in this world, and your opinion is welcome, whatever your opinion is. Because, and I know you mentioned this, like kind of the increased rate, like that's, where it's more prevalent now of autism. What do you see? And I know there's probably a multifaceted answer here, but what do you see as the reason or reasons that we're seeing autism? I mean, I guess ADHD can be wrapped up in there too, but that we're seeing that it's more prevalent. What do you think the reason is?
So I think that the idea is that a lot of people would love for me to just go out and say it's a medication product that they when they're kids.
Totally.
And it definitely doesn't help. The idea is if I could reverse my thoughts and if I had the knowledge that I have now, would I brought my children through the same process that everybody else goes? Because I will be honest, like I will share very truthfully that when I do onboarding calls, which I do, I think 85% of the people have noticed such a profound change from their children post MMR that they actually did bring it to attention to their physicians, not even thinking about autism. So they've had multiple visits after the fact for just showing delays. And so the idea, and I like the way that Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride explained it, is that the truth is that there's no one place that autism came from. And it's like some procedures or some things that happen could be what lead to breaking the camel's back.
Right.
But the truth is that if your parents also ate, like we have mercury now in the foods we eat, we have tin in the foods we eat, we have heavy metal exposures everywhere.
Yep.
And from my experience, it's never just one place.
Yeah.
But it is definitely on my radar to ask those questions.
Yeah. Right.
And I'm just sharing the data that I'm seeing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, and I believe that there's a couple of books I read in my FDN training. I'm sure you read them all. I can't remember the name of one of them, but it was basically about like, healing mental, because it talks about schizophrenia and autism and ADHD and all of that with diagnosis.
They're all umbrella.
Yes, exactly. And I remember, and it might have been the one you were just mentioning, but she was talking about in the book that people would love to be able to point like it's this vaccine that did it. And it's, because the whole thing with vaccines has come up so many times. But she was kind of saying what you were just saying, where it's like, and really and truly, I think, and from what she was saying, there's mercury in our vaccines. Like, and I'm not saying pro or against vaccines or anything right now. Like, it's not the conversation. But the fact is there is mercury in our vaccines. Results. Yep. Yeah. So it's a fact. And I think like you're saying, and this is what she was saying in the book based on all this research she did in like London or something. Yeah. It's a culmination of things, right? Like, it's not the one thing. So like, yeah, it could be the vaccine, but it wasn't the vaccine itself. It's the fact that you've had all this heavy metal toxicity, and then now you just got this dose of it. And then it just kind of, like you said, broke the camel's back. So I think it is. Yeah.
Because the whole point, we have to also look at like the whole point of vaccines being in healthcare. The idea of them is to create an inflammatory response to build antibodies. A lot of people, and at the beginning of my journey in educating people about not just autism, but also supporting them through vaccine schedules, as I used to teach them, okay, if you're going to do your vaccine schedule, this is like, do this before, do this after, but nobody tells you that. Nobody gives you the detox and the pre-detox, and the post-detox.
Yes, exactly.
So yeah, it's just something to definitely have on people's radar, is that everything that you put in your body, it doesn't matter how it gets in there, is either going to have a positive or a negative impact.
Right.
And so we do need to prepare our body if we're going to intentionally put something that's going to cause inflammatory responses, even if the long-term goal is to not get outside.
To build immunity or whatever. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I do love that you mentioned that there's a kind of before and after protocol you can take to help yourself detox from the other things that are in. So that's important for people to know too.
Yep. Yeah. I think it's like, and it is, it's also something that I do see come up a lot, and I will share that as well, is that oftentimes, like, I will see a lot of kids who develop autism whose parents actually have had a lot of chronic illness medication on the pregnancy that they needed to have, right? We're not able to just stop taking insulin, for example, or they're not able to not take their thyroid medication. Right. But all of these things I'm noticing as I do my onboarding, I ask a lot of questions. I have a very strict, I call it I hate to say it this way, but the autism origin story. I look at 3 generations, sometimes 4 down the line.
Wow, that's crazy.
And there are some very, very interesting recurrent things.
I'm sure. Yep. I'm sure you see a lot of it. That's so crazy to think too, how much we're passing down that you can look back that far and connect dots. Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, that was actually, I was going to mention that too. Do you see that as like part of a lot of the origin stories, trauma?
Some of them, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Definitely a correlation of like more than 30% of them have had some sort of either abusive in some form or other
Hmm.
past lineage. And that it was so impactful that like, the children are impacted by knowing about it, by
Yep.
understanding the story.
Yep.
So yeah, that's why lifestyle medicine does incorporate trauma in there.
Hmm.
Resilience building is a huge thing. So it is. It's not just nutrition, although nutrition has generally the one of the fastest
Yeah.
impact,
Yeah.
but it's a, like movement, getting away from screens, looking at building relationships and staying away from social media. Like dopamine, like it's amazing. Actually, just every little piece affects the others.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. So I have another question I want to ask you before we wrap up here, or I have one question I want to finish with, but before I ask you that, do you have any? I'm not that you haven't you've given so many tangible things for people to take away, but do you have any like top three, whatever places to start when someone is looking at like using this methodology to help their child?
yeah. So, number one, I always tell them to look at the nutrition gap. So, most illnesses in the world is all about nutritional deficiencies. One of the quickest ways to do nutrition filling is or nutrition gap filling or covering nutritional deficiencies is to either work with a nutritional therapist or to, if you're not going to be able to swing that, at least eat the colors of the rainbow.
Hmm.
I'll
Hmm.
always go back to that because it's the easiest way for sure to
Yep.
guarantee you're getting multi nutrients. The second thing is to start to remove the process of removing toxicity in your environment. That's the other number two, would always be going back to that because it impacts all of the other things that I could give you advice on, which would be like sleep. 54% of autistic individuals have sleeping problems. And that's where so much of our development comes from at that
Hmm.
age. But the thing is that toxicity and nutrition gaps impact sleep. So I usually find those are the easier ones. And then the last tip would be to focus on gut health. Really learn and immerse yourself in the new knowledge that, most studies that have come out for gut health were after 2006, which means that our physicians are just starting to learn about them.
Mm.
So, a really good book that I like to recommend to people who are starting out is actually, and it's not necessarily it does mention autism in it, but it's from a physician who was a gastroenterologist and decided to really immerse himself in microbiome. And his patients have had different outcomes. Now, I like his book specifically, and why I'm going to recommend it is that he's funny.
Always makes for a good read.
Because I feel like people learn, they say that you learn 400 times faster in fun. So
Oh.
it's called Fiber Fueled.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. I recommend that to everybody. Love
Yes.
that book.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Dr. B, Dr. B, I
Yes.
can't even pronounce his last name.
I know,
So
right?
I recommend the same book to people who are starting out because it's like a powerful book, but it's easy to digest
Yep.
because
It's super easy. Yes. Super easy to
yeah,
digest. And I like it too. I'm so glad you mentioned that. I was going to ask if you'd read that one, and I'm glad you mentioned it. I recommended that to so many people because I like that he takes a scientific approach. So it's not like I'm just saying it because I've heard, like, it's like he's got the studies to back up everything he's talking about. So yeah, such a good book.
it is. It's
Yeah,
one of my favorites. And I feel that people just like are like, wow, they come out of that book and they're like, I can do this.
totally.
That's what we
Yeah.
want. We want
Yeah.
people
No,
to
yeah.
start on their journey and be like, I can do
Yep.
this.
Yep. For sure. Yeah. Well, and
Those
even
are
in the book, he gives like a little like meal plan thing in the back of the book. So it's an easy place to start. Yeah. That's such a great tip.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Perfect. I love that. Okay. So before I finish with the last question, can you tell everybody where they can find out more about you and all that you're doing with your programs to help kids with autism and ADHD?
Yeah. So it's really simple. If you go to www.blueliferx.com, and the reason that we call it our company Blue Life RX is not because, and people just assume that it has to do with the color of autism, but autism has changed to multicolored. It's
Huh.
not. It actually, what we teach is all about the blue zones, which is the largest, those pockets in the world that live the longest with
Live the
most
longest.
vitality. Most
Mhm.
vitality. Yeah. Cause like people go there to those places and forget to die.
It's so
Well,
true. It's so true.
so that's what lifestyle medicine is. And so they've
Yeah.
just never taken an approach with it with children. That's the approach that I take. I'm
I
kind of
love
leading the
that.
front in a different space. So if you go
Yeah.
to that website, there is a webinar, like literally you can click on right away on the front page and it will give you 2 hours of education on the process. It's like
Oh, that's
my
awesome.
gift to the world of just showing them exactly the framework that we use for free.
I love that.
So yeah, and they can
That's
learn all
great.
about the program there.
Yeah, I love that. So of course I'll put the links to that in the show notes. Have you read the Blue Life Kitchens books. Was it Peter?
I do. I have them. I haven't finished them, but I have them.
They're so good. They're such beautiful books. I got there's like the American version, and he does such a good job. If y'all just go look at it, I can't remember his name. Is it Peter or Paul, or I don't know. He's like
Pollard.
That's it.
Last name is Pollard.
Yes. But they're such good books, but there's recipes from the Blue Zones. And it like teaches you all about the Blue Zones and stuff. So I love that you've incorporated that into the business. That's so great. I love it. Okay. So I'll put that in the show notes, of course, so you can go check out the website and go watch that webinar. So before, last question to wrap up, what do you think is the most important thing you can do to live with purpose?
Give me a second on this, because this is pretty profound. I think it's actually a simple answer is to live in purpose is to just live in the moment and to create versus consume.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Create versus consume. I love that. Such good words to finish on. Thank you so much, Natalie. This was so insightful. And I am just so grateful for the mission that you have and this path. You didn't choose the path, but here you are, like changing the world and trying to help one family at a time. So I love the mission you're on, and I'm grateful for you. And I'm hoping that by even just this interview, we can help a few more families kind of get through the other side of this and help, totally change their trajectory in life with their children's diagnosis. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was a wonderful conversation. I love these.
Thanks for listening to Hopeful and Wholesome, y'all. If you found value in this week's episode, please subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and leave a review to let me know what you thought. I love to know what you find useful in these episodes so I know how I can provide the most value I can to my listeners. And if you have topics that you want to know more about, I'd love to hear those as well. So shoot me a message on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. It's at The Hope Pedraza, or visit my website, hopefulandwholesome.com. Thanks, y'all.